Well, today I'll be talking about some problems of eyewitness identification. My own research in this area at present has a couple of foci. One, I'm interested in guessing by witnesses. It's something that psychologists have not, I think, given adequate attention to, but it's quite clear that a lot of witnesses are merely guessing. Some of them guess right, and they end up being counted, if you will, as having made correct identifications, both by researchers and also in the criminal justice system, and I think that there are some problems with that. I'm also hoping to begin some research looking at show-ups, hoping because it depends on the National Science Foundation's sending some cash to make it possible. It's actually an area that is understudied, show-ups being situations where a witness is presented with one target individual as a possible perpetrator. This is often done in field settings, sometimes as a result of a phone call going into the police describing a perpetrator, somebody matching that description being rounded up by the police, and either brought to the witness or the reverse. That individual may be in custody. There may be some very strongly suggestive elements in the entire situation that would prompt witnesses to make selections when they properly ought not. There are problems, for example, with rounding up people who bear a resemblance to the description given by the witness simply because of clothing. Now, unless it's fairly distinctive clothing, it may be possible that there are a relatively large number of people who match those descriptions. At present, most of the research done by psychologists on show-ups is really in the form of one-person photo arrays versus multi-person photo arrays, and largely lacks those field qualities, real crime situation qualities that might prompt witnesses to guess at higher rates than they would in the usual research method that we use, which may be a staged event showing people photographs. So we'd like to move the research a little closer to what happens in the field. Well, it's actually a little difficult to say what the primary causes are. Certainly one of the major causes is the fact that witnesses are prepared to make guesses and that they are presented arrays in suggestive and sometimes biased circumstances. So they may be encouraged to make a guess out of a photo array or out of a live lineup. And it turns out that it's actually somewhat difficult to assemble a fair lineup, that is a lineup or a photo array that is not in some ways biased against the suspect. That can arise through a variety of mechanisms, but that's part of the problem. The other problems, of course, are that witnesses frequently don't have very good memories to begin with. They are victims of crimes that may go down very quickly, so they have a limited opportunity to view the characteristics of the perpetrator. Their attention may be distracted by things like the presence of a weapon. They may not be functioning very effectively because of the stress of the situation, so that they're not actually forming a good memory, in part because of the stress factors. Sometimes there are long delays between the viewing of a criminal event and a subsequent identification, and that can entail substantial loss of memory. A great many identifications in urban areas are so-called cross-race identifications. It turns out that those cross-race identifications are significantly more likely to be in error than are same-race identifications. So a wide array of factors that can impinge in a great number of cases that produce errors. One of the more promising techniques available these days is to use double-blind sequential presentations. Now, that's a lot of fancy words for doing the following. One, assuring that the officers who are presenting a photo array or a live identification to witnesses do not know who the suspect is. This would minimize the possibility either of the administrator communicating, either intentionally but more likely unintentionally, some information about who the suspect is in an array, and secondly, minimize the possibility that a witness would actually be looking to the administrator for any assistance in figuring out who the suspect is. So that's the blind administration. A second promising feature is to use sequential presentation. The traditional, though certainly not the exclusive way in which witnesses have traditionally been presented arrays, is to show a block of photographs all at one time, or to show a live lineup where there may be a half a dozen people, all of them visible at the same time. It has been suggested, and there's actually mounting evidence, that a problem with simultaneous presentation is that it sort of facilitates a relative comparison of the people in the arrays to one another, with witnesses possibly throwing people who don't fit the description, their mental image, or don't resemble as well as somebody else what they remember about a perpetrator, winnowing the candidates down to a last person and witnesses being inclined to select that person. With a sequential presentation, the witness is forced to a much greater degree to compare one face or one person to what they have in memory and make a judgment about that one person before moving on to the next individual, and ideally making a decision about these individuals one at a time, minimizing the possibility that they can make comparisons to one another. Other things that should be done with witnesses, something that can be a problem with witnesses, concerns their confidence in their identifications. We have known for some time that the relationship between witness confidence and witness accuracy is less than perfect. And one of the things that can happen in an identification proceeding is witnesses may be given feedback prior to being asked how confident they are about their identification. And the most problematic kind of feedback would be to tell a witness, good, that's who the suspect was. How confident are you about that identification? Or falling somewhat short of that, but otherwise giving some indication to a witness that they have picked the suspect or they have made a correct decision. The effect of this can be to vastly inflate witnesses' confidence about the accuracy of their identification and further weaken any relationship that may exist between witness confidence and witness accuracy. There continues to be a growing body of research on the use of sequential identification procedures. The first efforts in this area really focused on getting judgments from witnesses one at a time. So seeing one face, making a judgment on that face. But there are lots of variations on the way in which sequential presentations could be accomplished. And I'd say that we haven't fully mapped out all of the possibilities. So for example, one early recommendation, which makes some sense, is that the witness should not know how many faces they're going to be shown. That may minimize their willingness to make a choice as they're getting near the end of the pile and haven't already seen a face that satisfies them for purposes of making an identification. So one suggestion is to backload arrays. In essence, give people a large stack of pictures, if you will, while recognizing that only a small number of them, 6, 8, 10, 12, at the front end would be the actual candidates for review. In the UK, they have been experimenting with video presentations to witnesses rather than either live or photographic arrays, partly as a way of getting close to a live presentation where there can be some movement, there can be sound, the suspect can be viewed from various angles rather than just say front on and full side view, which is typical of American photographic mugshots or arrays. There's also a little bit of research, fairly fascinating research coming out of Israel looking at very large arrays. So instead of presenting 6-person arrays, which is typical in the United States, or 9-person arrays, typical in the United Kingdom, at least one researcher is looking at 42 and 84-person arrays and even larger arrays, with the idea being that if witnesses are inclined to make guesses, you spread their guesses across more obviously innocent individuals and away from innocent suspects who may be embedded in these very large arrays. So I think we still have a good number of things to learn about the exact ideal method of presenting arrays to witnesses. Well, I think that more research is needed on issues relating to witness guessing and factors that promote guessing and minimize guessing. We have a very good and clear picture that an admonition to witnesses that the suspect, or actually the perpetrator, may not be in an array has a strong effect in reducing guessing by witnesses, but it certainly doesn't eliminate guessing by witnesses. So I think we could invest a little bit more time in thinking about ways to either minimize guessing by witnesses or minimize the damage that is done by witnesses who happen to guess innocent suspects, which is the fundamental problem with the eyewitness identifications, the mistaken identification of innocent individuals.